Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. If you are new to this channel, these videos, welcome, and thanks for watching for as long as you watch and for as much as you watch. If you're returning, thank you so much for coming back. I have brought in one of my cats today to help me with this video, since it's gonna be a little bit more of a difficult one. And I mean pets, right? Like, they make everything better no matter what. So this is Fish, and he's one of the sweetest cats ever. He also has allergies, so he might sneeze and cough and do weird things, but like that. It's like right on cue. You would have thought we planned that. It's been a while since I've recorded. I have reasons. I just needed a break. It's important to take care of your mental health, and it's critically important to take care of your mental health, and I needed to take a step back, and I felt right to record this video today, so this is what I'm going to do. I'll start with my usual disclaimers. In these videos, I only speak for myself. I don't speak for anybody else. I speak for myself. I speak for my experiences. I speak for like what I've been through. As part of those experiences, it could be that I've interacted with, I have an incredible amount of people, other victims, other survivors, advocates, attorneys, other people within the legal system, community outreach programs. I've done my own research, again, my own experiences, my own friends, my own family, and their experiences. So this isn't something that like I just don't know anything about and I'm just talking about it. I'm talking about it from my experiences as a DV, IPV survivor, and all of those interactions and all of the research that I've done. But if you do encounter someone who's going through something similar, or really anything at all, please don't apply my experiences or what I'm telling you to them. That's not appropriate. It's not for me. It's not for you. Ask them what their experiences are, and then actively listen and engage in that experience with them, so that they can speak from their perspective. Because even if two people experience the exact same thing, how they experience it, how they feel is going to be different. So we want to make sure that we're giving them that grace and space to have that experience. And then do your research. I might say something. If you don't believe me, look it up. That's fine. You don't have to believe me. Look it up for yourself. The second thing is like, share, subscribe. So liking kind of just shows people that these videos have some sort of value. It encourages people to watch them. Share. If you think you don't know someone who can benefit from these videos, or you don't know somebody who is currently in a DV, IPV, or abusive situation, I'm promising you, based on statistics alone, and those aren't even fully inclusive, you do. 1 out of every 3 women, I believe the statistic is, in the United States, experiences DV, IPV at some point in their life. And it's not just women, it's men, it's children, it's everything in between, everyone in between. DV, IPV thrives in silence, and it does not care what your gender, age, ethnicity, identity. It doesn't care. It doesn't care. It can get to anybody. So please share, so that these videos can get into the hands of the right people, and then, or the people who need them. And then subscribe, so that you can see updates, other videos that I post. You can come back later and see videos that you haven't watched yet. And just know, I don't get anything out of this. I don't get any money. I don't get any promotions. I don't get anything out of this. I go through these videos. I record these videos. They're very difficult, but I do it because I genuinely care about turning victims into survivors and helping other people who are experiencing extreme difficulty in their life. And the last thing is commenting. Comment. Let me know what you love. If you don't like something, let me know. I'll do my best, as I always do, to respect everybody's perspectives and what bothers them and what doesn't. And I'll do my best, but also to raise that awareness and make sure that we're keeping the conversation. Again, this thrives in silence. This ridiculous nonsense thrives in silence. So that's part of why I make these videos, is to bring it to light, to bring the truth to light about domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and abuse scenarios, child abuse, child neglect, and get that conversation going. So please comment, and be respectful and kind in your comments, not only for me, but for everybody else who might read them. One of the things I do, I use the royal you. I don't mean you literally, whoever's watching this. I just use the royal you. It's just what I do. So if I say you, just know it's a general form of speech. Now, getting into this video in particular, this video is going to be probably, it's a trigger warning. There's a big trigger warning on this one because we're going to be talking about the feeling of no longer wanting to live, and perhaps taking that feeling into your own hands and considering ending your life. So again, I only speak from my experiences, but I am letting everybody know I am very open in my videos. I will be talking about my own experience. So just trigger warning, please take care of yourselves. If you can't watch that's okay. It's okay, you don't have to. But you know, if you watch a little bit of it and it helps, great. If you can't, fine. If you watch the whole thing, wonderful. But just be careful and be kind with yourselves. So why am I doing this? Like I said, this is my first video in a while, and I'm actually really, really nervous to talk about this. My heart's like going, you know, a million miles per hour right now. But last night I was sitting on my couch and I realized that it was the 3-year anniversary of my 3 years. Yeah, that's right. 3 years. I don't know why I thought 2. 3-year anniversary since my own attempt. And I'm not gonna, I don't think, go into a lot of detail about what really happened, because that's not the point necessarily. But that attempt it started off as I can't handle being in this environment anymore. I feel like I can't get out. I'm incredibly trapped. I can't tell anybody because nobody's gonna listen to me. You know, if I say something and they don't listen to me and I go home and my abuser finds out that I've talked, what's he going to do to me? What's he going to do to my children? What's he going to do to my pets? I probably won't. Like, I don't even know, right? I had no idea. So I didn't really talk about it. I didn't feel like I could talk about it, not only because I felt like people weren't going to believe me, but I also felt like I would just end up going home to essentially be horrifically abused even more than I already was, and potentially murdered. And then my children would also be at risk, and my pets would also be at risk, and others would also be at risk from the rage that this individual would go into. So when I was sitting there last night, I went through and just kind of acknowledged the fact that it's been 3 years, and it was very close. And my situation started off as an attempt to end my life because I felt so trapped. But as I realized what was happening and I was trying to step back from this, my perpetrator actually, my abuser actually used it as an opportunity to abuse me more, and then actually use that as a weapon to almost, I don't even know how to say it, but began to actually carry out the act against me that I was carrying out against myself when I was trying to back out of it. So when I realized what was happening, like I was kind of like, oh my God, like I don't want to die. I don't want to do this. And I tried to essentially stop. He actually noticed that and then decided that it was going to go through anyway. And he started actually carrying out the act. And then made it in a sense so that I wouldn't actually succeed. And then when paramedics got there and I was transported to the hospital, he then told everybody that he was basically a hero and that he had saved my life, when actually he had gotten me to that point of needing to be transported to the hospital. So it's a pretty awful situation. But here's why it matters to talk about it. First of all, this is something that people don't talk about, right? Like, we do and we don't. We talk about it in school. We kind of bring attention to it. There, you know, people will say, oh, well, you know, if you're feeling that way, reach out to a crisis hotline. 100%. Absolutely. If you are feeling like you do not want to, and you do not want to live, you want to end your life, Maybe even at something as seemingly benign as, I don't want to wake up tomorrow, right? Seek whatever help you can seek. Call a crisis hotline that's in your state. There's also a national crisis hotline that you can call. Reach out to a friend, somebody that you trust, to go to the hospital. There is no shame in this, right? And that's the problem, is that we have these resources, and now they're starting to talk about, suicide prevention in schools. And we have at, if you work in a place of, you have a place of employment that's a little bit larger, you'll usually have basically an employee, I can't remember what it's called right now, but an employee resource or an employee support, something within your HR, right? So you have these resources available to you. When I say we don't talk about it, it's not that it's not visible. It's that we don't talk about it as human beings, and the experience of wanting to end your life, the experience of having that feeling of being completely hopeless, having that feeling that nothing is going to get better, having that feeling of being completely trapped. And we don't talk about that at a human level. It is so taboo. Even domestic violence, intimate partner violence, right? Even as a survivor, I went through it for over 10 years, right? And when I go to talk about it with others, or something, comes up, it's kind of like this thing. You can kind of see it, you can feel it once you've been in it. It's like a brotherhood, a sisterhood, some sort of energetic family, where you can kind of see it on other people, or certain key phrases will kind of go, oh, I know this phrase, I know this situation, and you kind of tread lightly into it. For me, I am incredibly open about it. Why? Because someone needs to be incredibly open about it. I am the last person that ever thought I would be in a DV/IPV, an abusive marriage, an abusive situation. I am the last person that anyone thinks would have been in that situation. And still to this day, people who have known me for years and years and years, and who have worked with me, and who worked with me when I was going through that, say to me all the time when they find out, I had no idea. Like, you always seemed so happy. You always seemed just totally okay. How did you get all of your work done? Like, how did you manage to juggle all of this? It's survival. You find a way. It's survival. You're surviving. And so you do whatever you have to do to survive. And you're not sitting there thinking, well, how am I going to do this? You just do it. And so for me, that was it, is I just did it. I just kept going. And so for people who have worked with me or known me forever, they were completely shocked that this was my existence, that this was my life. And honestly, so was I. So was I, thinking that I was never going to get to that point. I would never be in that situation. How many people do we know that are addicted to drugs, or are addicted to alcohol, or some other item like that, some other substance? And we think back maybe when they were in elementary school, middle school, maybe even high school, and they're like, oh, I would never do drugs. I would never become an alcoholic. I would never, right? How many people do we know who say, I would never be in an abusive marriage. I would never be in an abusive relationship. I would never allow somebody to talk to me like that, right? But like I said, DV, IPV, substance abuse, all these things, nobody is immune to these things, right? And the way DV, IPV works, it is usually a very, very, very slow process. And it's basically social engineering in a relationship. And these abusive relationships don't necessarily have to be with people, right? We can have abusive relationships with our jobs. We can have abusive relationships with organizations that we work for or work with, that we volunteer for, and they become abusive. And we, especially if you're a really good person that just wants to do good, and you have a lot of patience and you have a lot of empathy, you stick around because you feel that commitment. And those who are not like that see that, and they're like, what else can I get? Let me take more for me. You're just going to put up with it. I know this, so I'm just going to keep doing it, and then it's going to escalate. And that's how DV-IPV works, at least in my research and in my experience and in my conversations with others. So as part of that, the fact that nobody is immune, and we don't talk about it, and we don't have these conversations, there's like this built-in judgment that results in an incredible amount of shame for someone who has experienced this. Now, even if it's not out, right? So for me, with some people, I was open about it and what had happened. My family knew. My mom had come out to the state I was living in at the time to help me. My family knew. A couple of my friends knew. And it was okay. It was very uncomfortable to talk about because the questions were always there. Well, like, why would you do that? Like, what got you to that point? Why? And they just wanted to understand. They were seeking to understand, right? But I didn't know necessarily all the reasons why, because I was still in the environment. So I couldn't even make sense of any of that because, again, I was just trying to survive. Once I fled and I was out, it became very, very public. Not from this, very public in the legal system, because it became a weapon for the other side. So it became one of these, well, how can you possibly be a good mother if you're suicidal? How do we know you're not going to do this? And it literally was talked about in court as if I had hurt somebody else and I had done all these terrible things. But the thing is the other individual had done something similar, but I wouldn't use that as a weapon because to me, that's disgusting, right? But these other individuals, people who are so judgmental or who will weaponize this moment of immense sorrow and grief and complete hopelessness and feeling trapped in the most vulnerable points in someone's life, and then they weaponize it. But I will tell you, and I say this and I stand by this. I stand by this 100%, and I would say it to literally anyone. I do not believe that anyone is immune to not feeling the immensely deep sorrow and hopelessness that would lead to someone at least contemplating no longer wanting to live. I don't believe it. I don't. And people, I'm sure, will look, at this if they do, and they'll say, oh, I would never, right? Okay, well, I would, people who say, I would never do drugs, and then they, become a drug addict, or they consider it, right? I would never drink. They consider drinking alcohol. I would never do this. I would never do that. Maybe it's even for their own reasons of like their religion, right? Which is fine. But to use that belief that you are immune to shame, weaponize against another who has felt this and who is maybe even open about talking about this to help save others is deplorable. It's a horrific act. And so I bring this up, and I'm bringing this very publicly to be like, I know so many people who have had ideation. I know so many, or if people don't know what that is, thinking about it. I know so many people who have actually planned, right? So you've got this stage of like kind of thinking about it, ideation, and you got this state of like kind of planning, and then all of this is on like a spectrum, right? So your degree of ideation and your level of planning, and then the act of carrying it out, right? Sometimes individuals won't get to the point of carrying it out. Sometimes they just end up harming themselves in other ways. Maybe it is self-deprecation, or I think that's the right word, where they're just really hateful towards themselves. Sometimes it becomes one of those of self-harming, but not to the point of ending their lives. Maybe it's to the point where they actually do try to carry out that act, and they don't get to that point, and they live, right? But just like everything in life is on a spectrum, there might be people who are on the really, really low end, but to believe that you will never get to that point is just a falsehood. It's a lie that everyone just kind of either tells themselves or pretends like they haven't thought about it, and then they use it to shame. Well, here's the thing, and this is something I say all the time as well. People are mirrors for other people, right? So if you look at someone, pick someone in your mind, maybe it's even you, right? I'm more of an introspective person. I'm very hard on myself. So I usually look at like how I experience reality and what I am doing. But if you want to look at someone else, pick someone in your mind and think about that person. And anytime you have seen that person shame another person for something that they're doing, and once you have that in your mind, come back and go, does that person who's shaming the other person actually exhibit this behavior? I'm willing to bet chances are good, even if it's not to the same degree. Remember, everything's on a spectrum. Even if it's not to the same degree, do you have that person in your mind and you're like, wow, they really went after that person for being, being selfish, right? Like, that person's so selfish. That person is just like, everything's about them. Everything, they just always want to talk about themselves. They just this, that, and the other thing. Okay, now think about it. This person who's saying this, especially the more energy, the more passion, the more energy behind the shaming, does that person exhibit that behavior? Because usually, literally in my experience, my entire life, I have an incredible memory, so I can go back extremely far. My memories are extremely vivid the majority of the time, unless there's some sort of event that stops me from being able to remember. But every single time, I've actually tried to think of times when this didn't happen. Every single time someone came around, was around me or whatever, and was like, just over the top shaming of another, over the top calling someone out for some crappy behavior, just over the top about it, they usually exhibited that behavior to some degree. So people are mirrors. Not only do we tend to build relationships with people who we feel are like us, or who we see our positive side of things, we see the positive in them that we see in ourselves, or we see something in them that we want to see more of in ourselves, right? Like if we want to see someone who is more, if we want to be more empathetic, or we see that in ourselves, we'll seek it in others. That's also on the not so great side of things, right? So if somebody is shaming others for being selfish, are they a selfish person? So when we're talking about someone who maybe has made an attempt, and this has been such an experience in my life, but has made an attempt and who survived, first of all, those people who shame me, they don't know the whole situation. They don't know that in this attempt, I actually attempted to stop, and then my abuser attempted to kill me. They don't know that, right? So first of all, they don't have the facts. Second of all, they weren't there, and they don't know what I was feeling, what I was experiencing, and what I was going through. So they really have no position to judge me or anybody else. And third of all, the more they shame me, the more I get concerned about them. And this is a fact. So the more I hear things like, oh, suicide is such a selfish act. How? That's as if saying that individual exists or existed, if they, they went through with it, right? That they exist or they existed to serve the needs, desires of others. That's not why we exist. We as human beings are not here, in my opinion, to serve the fancies, serve the desires, serve the wants of others. To me, that is selfish, right? So to say, oh, this person carried out this horribly selfish act because they were in so much pain that they literally couldn't deal with it anymore. How selfish. I would implore those people to turn it around and be like, how selfish is it that instead of wondering what we could learn from that experience and what we could do different to help support those individuals and remove the stigma, the horrible vision, the view on ending your life, or depression or anxiety or mental health issues or mental illness or whatever. Instead of thinking to yourself, what could I have done maybe to help? What could I have done to create that safe space? What could I have done to make that situation better for them? Your immediate reaction is, how selfish, or why would you do that, or how could you do that, or how could you even think that? That brings me to my next point. So aside from these shameful experiences where you've already done something, for me, I feel an immense amount of shame and grief, right? Last night, sitting on the couch, it's this for me, very strange. It was very sudden that I remembered. This actually happened the same way last year. I was sitting on the couch. It was the end of the night, and I was just sitting there, and I looked at my phone, and I saw the date, and I was just like, wow, 3 years. And there's a joy associated with it for me that I wasn't successful in that. I have been through an incredible amount in my life, and I have been through an insane amount since then, right? Since this night. And it's September 10th, 2021. And I go back over the last 3 years in one day, and there is a gratitude that I survived. And the fact that I survived that, the fact that I survived the final event on my birthday, August 1st, 2022, almost a year later, when I really shouldn't have survived, his attempt to end my life for me again. And that was the date that I fled. And everything that's happened since, all of the horrible things that have happened since, there are so many beautiful things that have happened. And even something silly like creating these videos, creating these videos in the hopes that it helps just one person, just one. If it helps just one, when I look at the count and it's like, okay, well, like 16 views. Maybe one of those 16 was the one that needed to see it. I don't need to go viral. I don't need a lot of money. I just don't care about this stuff. I care about helping others. So there is this immense gratitude that I feel, that I'm happy I'm still here. I'm happy that I have been given this life over and over and over again when I shouldn't have been alive, really, to share what I know, to help others, to hear laughter, to have a cat named Fish sitting on my lap, just wanting to be here, just wanting warmth and love, to see the beautiful parts of life. There are a lot of really crappy parts of life. It's a lot, right? It's just a lot. But there are a lot of beautiful parts of life, and so I feel this gratitude. But I also do feel that shame. I get that knot in my stomach where I'm just like, oh man. You know, because there's a lot of shame there. And it's grief, it's shame, it's all of these things that are okay to feel. You know, you don't have to look at whatever you've done in life and you know, if you've made a mistake, you've made a mistake, and you don't have to be okay with it. You don't have to not be okay with it. There's no manual for how you should feel. So I think it's important to point that out. But when we talk about the shaming that people do to others and the fact that they're not immune to getting to that point, one of the other things that I have experienced repeatedly and I've observed with others is this notion that people will ask, they'll seek to understand perhaps, of why someone got to that point or how someone got to that point. First of all, sometimes there's no rhyme or reason, right? Like, you don't know what that person is experiencing. Mental illness is a real thing. Depression, anxiety, other mental illnesses, bipolar disorder. I mean, so many things that you just get to that point. Postpartum, that's a really great one, right? You know, people don't understand postpartum, and I had it with my second child, and it was horrible. It was horrible, and I got to the point where I sought help from a doctor, because the thoughts were just like, it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to hurt anyone or myself or anything. It was just that something terrible was going to happen. There was an impending doom that I couldn't make sense of, and I needed help getting through that stage. That's a hormonal thing. That, like, you can't control that. That's like saying you can control if you're a type 1 diabetic, or you can control if you have, you know, Hashimoto's or some other thyroid disease, or if you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Like, you can't control these things. You can do whatever you can try to do to manage it, but you can't control it. It just happens. Well, so does this, right? This feeling can just become very overwhelming and can be very sudden, and you don't have a rhyme or reason. But let's say someone seeks to understand, and they're talking to someone, and they say, well, you know, what got you to that point, and how did you get there, and why, and what was going on? Here's the issue with some. And this is something that, as a survivor of my own suicide attempt, and of DV, IPV, and an immense amount of abuse in a really, really difficult life in general, there's this notion that whatever you were experiencing was not at that level for the other person to warrant or justify that act, right? So let's say you have my situation where I have had so many illnesses as part of having an autoimmune disease, and I was in an abusive marriage for, you know, a decade, and I have every reason to believe that I was also being poisoned during this time, and I have, you know, records to show that. I'll never be able to prove it, but, you know, Occam's razor there. So you look at this, and you got this crazy existence, right? And then someone might be at that point where, and this is why I say don't compare my experiences or apply my experiences or anybody else's experiences to anybody. And you might have that a person over here who, I don't know, loses their dog, whatever. And you maybe you're talking to a third person, and you give these two experiences, and they go, okay, well, this one over here, you know, that had this really crazy life, really just blah, blah, blah. That one I can kind of make sense of, right? This one over here, like, it's a dog. Like, I wouldn't do that over a dog. Well, guess what? That's not for you. That's not for you. That's their experience. And no matter what they are experiencing, no matter how ridiculous it might seem to the person asking the questions, or the person seeking to understand, or understanding, or trying to make sense of what happened, it doesn't matter what got them to that point. It doesn't matter why they got to that point. It doesn't matter how they got to that point. Irrelevant. To that person, whatever they were experiencing at that time, no matter how unreal it seems to the person asking the questions, it's not unreal to them. It is real to them. Their experience is 100% real. What they are feeling is 100% real. We cannot control our emotions. Our emotions come from mainly our subconscious mind. If you could control your emotions, then you wouldn't have triggers. You wouldn't have trauma triggers, right? Because you would just go into it and you would be like, okay, well, I'm just not going to feel this right now. Like, no matter what happens, I'm not going to get sweaty palms. My heart's not going to race. I'm not going to get blotchy. I'm not going to feel like I'm going to pass out. My legs aren't going to go weak. I'm not going to experience any of this. No. Nope. No. You can learn to cope with it over time through therapy and healing and all of that stuff. Sure. You can learn how to reframe. You can go through EMDR. You can go through all of these things like I'm doing and other people do. Sure. But to convince yourself that you're going to be able to control your emotions, you might want to try convincing yourself of something else, because it's literally a waste of your time. If you don't have any emotions, well, we might be having a different conversation at some point. Not us. You with someone else. But so you you look at that and you say, okay, so if I'm the person who is experiencing this, I will say this from me to you. If you are a person who experiences that immense sorrow, that immense pain, that gets you to the point that you no longer want to live or you want to end your life, I see you 100%. And no matter what anybody else says, no matter how many times people might try to minimize your experience, no matter how many different ways you basically gaslight yourself into thinking it's not a big deal, it doesn't matter. Your experience, your feelings, your emotions, regardless of where they're coming from, those experiences, those feelings, that's real. That's real to you. And it doesn't have to make sense of how it got there. All, to me, that is required is that you acknowledge that this is what you're feeling, and I implore you to get help. And if you are a person who is hearing this from another person, it's not your place to judge them. It's not your place to tell them what they should or should not be feeling, or whether or not their feelings or experiences are justified from your perspective. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's never going to matter. What matters is those experiences for that individual are real, just like your experiences for whatever you're experiencing, and your feelings for whatever you're experiencing, those are real. We can't control that. I can't necessarily go look at a person and be like, I'm going to be in love with this person. I'm going to be in love with this person. Or like, I'm going to absolutely despise this person. Like, no, that's not the interactions and the experiences and the behavior over time or whatever, that might get you to an understanding of why you have feelings, whatever feelings those are for another person. But that's pretty much it. If you really think you're going to be able to control that, again, try to convince yourself of something else. You probably have a, better bet convincing yourself that lava doesn't burn than convincing yourself that you're, successfully, that your emotions can be controlled by you or really anyone else. So those who are having these thoughts, these feelings, again, I see you. There are resources. This is not one of those, public service announcements where I'm like, oh my gosh, don't do it. That's not for me. My reason for recording this is to call out, those things that I've mentioned. Your experiences are real. Your experiences are yours. Your experiences are not for others to judge. If you're a judgmental person, you might want to check yourself, because you're not helping. And you're not only not helping others, you're not helping yourself either. So if you want to turn that back around and somehow make it about you, and that works for you, great. But again, that's not for you. If you think that you are immune to immune being, for anybody who maybe won't know that word, immune being like it's not going to happen to you. We live in a world where, people, especially in the United States, in our society, where people are like, oh my gosh, this could never happen to me. Or, oh my gosh, I would never do this. Or, oh my gosh, that's never going to come through. No, I work in security. Anybody who's watched other videos knows this about me. I work in security, mainly cybersecurity and physical security. And this is something that I train people where I work. Nobody is immune to phishing attack. So if you think like, oh, I don't need to know about phishing emails or phishing text messages or whatever because I'm never going to get one, you are so wrong. You are so wrong. And that thought process is actually probably going to make you a bigger target, because you're going to do things that are silly, that are going to make you a bigger target in the world of phishing, right? So this backwards thinking of like, oh my gosh, this will never happen to me, or oh my gosh, I'm never going to do this, or oh my gosh, I'm never going to get to this point. I'm telling you that's a very, very dangerous thought process to have. Not only for others, but for yourself. Let's see. So where was I? Kind of got off on a tangent there. I do that. So knowing that you're not immune, knowing that your experience is your experience and other people's experience is their experience, and it's not for you to understand, it's for you to be understanding, and not only of others, but of ourselves. When we go through situations where we're feeling something and we don't know why, it's okay to not know. It's okay to not know. It's okay to not even understand why you feel that way, even if you know what's causing it, but you don't understand why you're feeling that way. Okay, but you can be understanding. You can have that grace and space and that empathetic position of being understanding, that no matter whether you understand why or not, or you know why or not, you can be understanding that that experience for others and for yourself is still very, very real. I think I've hit all the main points that I wanted to hit. Fish, I appreciate your assistance, your fish assistance. That was terrible. That was really bad. But anyway, so if you made it to the end of this video, I appreciate you sticking around. If you are a person who tends to judge others, or tends to shame others, or tends to kind of get over the top about what other people are doing, I would hope that you would look within and realize that people are mirrors, and you probably exhibit this behavior more than you realize, and this is something that you're trying to project on others or remove the attention from yourself. For all of those who have lost family members, friends, or others to suicide, I can imagine how painful that is. I know from my own experience how painful it was for me. I've lost quite a few friends and very close people in my life who have lost their lives to ending it for themselves. If you are a person who has lost a friend or family member to DV, IPV, or any other form of abuse, or any other form of just heinous act by another person, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of these losses. The reason I record videos like this, and this one especially, is to try to give a voice to those who don't have one, or can't use it for whatever reason. Again, I don't speak for everyone. I'm just trying to get the word out there and remove this stigma, destigmatize this whole thing, because it's ridiculous. It's not enough to have these programs, and then when it gets brought up in reality, it's minimized or it's dismissed, or those individuals are called, selfish, or whatever they're called, just these mean words, or it's allowed to be weaponized in a courtroom, or, by an abuser. It's allowed to be weaponized in legal proceedings. It's allowed to be weaponized in anything. It's not enough to have programs. If then, when someone takes that action or even thinks about that action, the shame associated with it prevents them from actually using those resources. It's not enough to have the resources if we don't have the safety in the environment as people, as human beings, to actually seek that help. Tools are only as good as their user, and users are only going to seek the tools if they feel safe and comfortable doing so. If you are a person who has gotten to that point, who has felt these things, who has maybe attempted and has made it through, again, I see you. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here, because someone who feels so immensely deep about life, or feels so much pain for something that they've experienced, maybe the hurt of another, or just the overwhelming negativity of the world, or whatever, to have the ability to feel at such an immensely deep level is actually a beautiful gift. It is a curse as well. Speaking from experience, it can be a curse, because how do you get away from it? How do you get away from feeling such pain? I am understanding of this. I recognize this. I feel the same thing. I do see you. I am glad you're here, because if we can start to redirect this emotion, this immense empathy, this energy, this love, this everything that could be light, if we can start to talk about it and start to direct it appropriately in the direction of light instead of in the direction of darkness, imagine what people like you, imagine what people like me who feel on such a deep level, imagine what we could do. Imagine what we could do together. And imagine if the people who are watching this, who may be a more shaming type of person, or maybe have felt these things but wanted to just, push away from it as much as possible and became almost accusatory or blaming of others to remove that attention from themselves. I see you too. You're not alone either. And the more we talk about this, the more we bring this to light, the more we destigmatize things like immense grief, immense sorrow, and things like, ending your life. I don't know how that can be bad. I don't know how building a community that's trusting and loving and kind and understanding and willing to step in, really step in, not just say, here, go call someone. Really willing to lean in and hold their neighbor's hand through that. Imagine what a more beautiful place this world would be, and I can't imagine why others wouldn't want to do that. I can't imagine why we wouldn't want to create a heaven on earth while we're still here. So if you are currently in a space where you feel like you might be getting to that point of seeking to harm yourself, seeking to harm others, you're just emotionally distraught, reach out. Reach out to a loved one, reach out to a crisis hotline, reach out to a friend that you can trust. And sometimes the friends you can trust are in the most unlikely of places. I don't know if you can contact me via YouTube. I have no idea. I can probably put my email in the chat. In the comment section. There are Reddit boards where you can, reach out. There's actually a domestic violence Reddit board where you can reach out to others and kind of get advice and just get an understanding of what is going on, and maybe get some resources in your local area. You can call your local law enforcement. You can call shelters if you're in a DV/IPV situation. And I was helping a friend earlier with an individual who is experiencing some postpartum and is in need of assistance, and this friend was asking me for some guidance here. So one of the things I looked up is there's my state's crisis hotline, but there's also the National Lifeline, which is 988 is the number, it seems. 988 is the National Lifeline. Most states, if not all states, have a crisis line, 24/7 crisis line. These people want to be here for people who need help. I've called before myself, not in this state, but in another state, when I was at that point, and they helped. They helped just talk me through it. They were just there to listen without judgment. They don't know you, you don't know them, and you can just talk to someone, right? So reach out. Get that help, get that support. There is no shame in any of this. I don't care. I'm going to just speak for myself, but I'm just going to say I don't give a shit what anybody else says. From my perspective, there is no shame in feeling what you feel and feeling so deeply that you almost feel like you can't feel it anymore. So I will put, this might be a really bad idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. I will put an email address in the comments section, and if you don't feel comfortable commenting on the video and you don't feel comfortable reaching out that way, I'll put an email. Again, this might be a really bad idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'll put an email address. If it gets to be too much, I'll figure it out then. But please take care of yourselves. Please know that you're not alone. Please know that the unsolicited opinions and the unsolicited shame and the unsolicited questions from others you don't have to put up with it. If you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to. And if they start to give their unsolicited opinions, guess what? Thanks anyway, and walk away. Like, you don't have to stand there and take it. And if you are one of those people, just don't. Just please don't. And find it within yourself to learn how to be an empathetic, non-judgmental person. And if you're not going to be one of those people, just why don't you just make the choice to walk away instead of making it worse for others? Again, I thank you so much for being here. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. Let's have that conversation. And again, if you're at that point, know that you're not alone, and know that, at least for me, speaking for myself, I don't judge you and I don't shame you. And I'm sorry that whatever has gotten you there has gotten you there to this feeling. But know that I am here for you in any capacity I can be, if nothing else, energetically, from one human being to another. Thank you so much. Let's save some lives together. Thank you.